Would like to greet you all with heartfelt feelings.
A couple of minutes ago, we have observed the closure of the NATO Summit in Madrid with the ending of the third session of the North Atlantic Council a couple of minutes ago. Thus, we have managed to finalize one of the most historical summits of NATO. The summit was instrumental in confirming by the allies to unite and forge a closer solidarity in the face of existing challenges. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank King Felipe VI and distinguished Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and all the other Spanish authorities for having shown us the utmost hospitality and a very successful organization of this summit. And due to the tremendous efforts invested in the success story of this summit, I also would like to thank Secretary General Stoltenberg and his team once again. In the aftermath of the breaking out of the war in Ukraine, I've had the chance to get together with the world leaders 3 times this year, one of them in Brussels and twice through video conference. The Madrid Summit availed an important opportunity for us in order to analyze the current situation as well as forge a new vision for the future. The support of our alliance to Ukraine is 100% and it's complete. But with this support, we have to put forward a peace vision in order to stop the humanitarian crisis, the destruction, and tears once and for all. So in order to establish a permanent ceasefire, we have to intensify our diplomatic initiatives. Within the first session of the summit that took place yesterday, the President of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, joined us through video conference. And I have been sustaining a very close dialogue with him ever since the beginning of this process. And you are probably aware of the fact that I have been in continuous and close contact with the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. All of these endeavors, all of these efforts are there in order for us to take the steps forward in order to establish a permanent peace. So long as the conflict continues, casualties and destruction would increase. We can closely feel the negative ramifications of the war, primarily on the inflation rates and the global economy. As Turkey, we hope and pray that there will be not a loser in the establishment of a fair peace process. We were inspired and we became optimistic with the initiation of the Istanbul process, and we have to strengthen those endeavors. Turkey is assuming a responsibility, and we are an ally that can speak to all of the parties and that can share the burden. And I know that this role played by Turkey as an ally is being appreciated within NATO. And we were very happy to observe that once again. Through our contacts here, ever since the beginning of the war, we've managed to voice our priorities once again, such as the diminishing of the humanitarian crisis due to the conflict and the initiation of a peace process through ceasefire once and for all. I have shared our contributions to the UN plan in order to take out the cranes at the Ukrainian harbors and ports within the Black Sea. A quartet mechanism which will be established in Istanbul hopefully very soon under the auspices of the United Nations with the participation of all of the stakeholders. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important documents that drew the most attention of the international community was the new strategic concept that we had approved yesterday. Back in the year 2010, the strategic concept was accepted as a result of the Lisbon Summit, and this new strategic concept will be replacing that. And this document is once again underlining the significance of the fundamental principles and the values of NATO and the principles of solidarity for the future. This is a vision set forward in order for the alliance to adapt itself to the changing threats and security environment of the future. Turkey is celebrating its 70th anniversary to the participation in NATO. And with the contributions that we have paid, we have always moved in full compliance with the spirit of the alliance. And undoubtedly, we will be one of the allies of this platform that will have a say in the future vision of our alliance. In the strategic concept, terrorism is being acknowledged as the most severe asymmetrical threat. And the underlining of the NATO's resolve to fight against terrorism in all forms and in all types for the future is very significant. But this resolve should not remain only on paper. In actuality, we shouldn't make a distinction whatsoever between any of the terrorist organizations, and we have to sustain our fight against terrorism in full solidarity. During my statements at the sessions and during my bilateral meetings, I have repeatedly signified as to how important this issue is for Turkey. And I said that this is not a problem only for us all, but also for the NATO allies in its entirety. The murder organizations that are trying to derive benefits out of the lives and out of the blood of the innocent civilians are our common adversaries. The weapons that are being used against us today can also be used against other allies. Nobody can guarantee otherwise. History has shown us over and over that if we fail to observe the situation for what it is, these negligences will come back to us in the form of very fatal threats. In the last couple of days, we have seen terrorist organizations such as PKK and its affiliates which demonstrate an unprecedented reaction without considering anything else, and it's a clear confirmation as to what I'm talking about. It's just like a malignant tumor that is growing every day, and it's threatening social peace, stability, and security, and that we have to get rid of this tumor once and for all. We have very strongly underlined the message, and we conveyed this message strongly, that we want our allies to support us, not only through words, but also through actions. And we've had the opportunity to watch a video where we have shown Turkey's long-lasting struggle against terrorism, which is very resolved and which is very committed. Thus, the bloody faces of PKK, PYD, FETÖ, and Daesh had been shown to all of our interlocutors. Where we stand today, we have to see this fact for what it is. If we want to protect the safety and the convincing nature of NATO, as the allies, we have to combat against all forms of terrorism in a very clear sense. We have to be consistent, and we have to be very sincere in terms of the steps that we take forward. Stopping financing of terrorism and stopping terrorist organizations from recruiting new members are two indispensable parts of this fight against terrorism. Almost for the last 4 decades, we have been fighting terrorism, and we have lost thousands of lives in the hands of terrorism. And as such a country, we can no longer tolerate lingering on. Within the framework of Sweden and Finland's application for NATO membership, we have experienced certain processes where we've managed to put Turkey's red lines forward quite clearly. Ever since the first day, we have always talked about our concerns, and we've talked about the issues that we were very sensitive about. We were always constructive, yet we were always resolved. On Thursday, under the facilitation of Secretary General, we got together with the leaders of Sweden and Finland within the framework of Summit. The memorandum that we had signed altogether is a beacon which shows us that Turkey's concerns had been appreciated and understood. Of course, this is a beginning. This is an inception. It's an invitation. But what matters most is to keep the promises that were committed. From this moment on, we will be closely monitoring the implementation of the issues which were recorded within this memorandum, and we will take the necessary steps forward accordingly. Distinguished members of the press, We shouldn't think that diplomacy is a zero-sum game where one side always loses and the other side always wins. On the contrary, we have to believe and remain committed to the fact that diplomacy is the shortcut, is the most guaranteed path towards the common interests and common benefits that we need to achieve. This memorandum that was signed between Turkey, Sweden and Finland requires us to have this perspective whilst we are analyzing the developments. And that's how I believe it's going to be. With no doubts, this memorandum is a diplomatic triumph that was accomplished after a very trying period of negotiations for Turkey and for our nation. With the trilateral memorandum, we are going to observe a full cooperation in fighting against PKK and its affiliates. We will see full solidarity in fighting against all forms and all types of terrorism that would reveal themselves. A commitment that no longer a support would be provided to PYD, YPG and FETÖ. Also, a pledge to increase cooperation with the eradication of embargoes imposed upon us in the defense industry and the elimination of restrictions. A pledge provided by Sweden and Finland that they were going to revisit and tailor their local legislations and their implementations in fighting against terrorism and defense industry exports. There are going to be concrete steps taken forward for the extradition of terrorist criminals. Sweden already pledged the extradition of 73 terrorists to Turkey. There was a pledge about the banning of revenues collected by PKK and its affiliates and the recruitment of new members and the investigation of such attempts from now on. And we have received strong and resolved guarantees that terrorist propaganda against Turkey will be stopped once and for all. In order to examine the implementation of these pledges, we have decided that we are going to establish a common mechanism in order to welcome different stakeholders from different parties. Finland and Sweden, including PESCO and other European Union security mechanisms, will support Turkey's full partnership in the widest sense possible. From the first day on, we have always been talking about our sensitivities, and all of those sensitivities had been stated clearly in the trilateral memorandum. Along with Turkey and NATO, Finland and Sweden have both become very triumphant in the signing of this memorandum as well, along with the people of these countries. Every concrete step that we take forward in fighting terrorism will contribute tremendously to the peace, prosperity and security of these nations. Distinguished members of the press, during the summit sessions and within the margin of this gathering, I've had the chance to get together with many of the heads of states and governments, and within that framework, we have undertaken our Quartet Summit with the participation of NATO Secretary General Mr. Stoltenberg, the President of Finland Mr. Niinisto, and the Swedish Prime Minister Ms. Andersson. And right next to our summit, we've had bilateral meetings with the President of France Mr. Macron, the Prime Minister of the UK Mr. Boris Johnson, the EU Council President Mr. Michel, the President of the United States, Mr. Biden, and the Federal Chancellor of Austria, Mr. Nehammer, the Prime Minister of Spain, Mr. Pedro Sanchez, the Federal Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Scholz, as well as the Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mr. Rutte, the President of Romania, Mr. Iohannis, and President Sain of South Africa. And during these meetings and during these discussions, we've had the chance to casually talk to many leaders, including the leader of Hungary and Montenegro. During these discussions and during these casual talks, we've managed to talk about the developments taking place in Ukraine with our counterparts, and we have exchanged our opinions within the framework of the agenda of the alliance, as well as we've managed to talk about different issues within our bilateral agendas in different dimensions. As the fifth country providing one of the highest contributions to NATO, having the second largest army of the organization, and that has been a member of the NATO organization for the last 70 years, Turkey is undoubtedly going to have a say in the future of NATO, just like it did in the past. And it's been clearly observed by all of the participants. While we shall be leading our independent foreign policy and sovereign foreign policy, we will keep on providing all forms of contributions and support to NATO within the spirit of alliance, and we would like to see the same solidarity from all of our allies. I hope and pray that this will be the turning of a new tide that we have observed within the Madrid Summit. With these thoughts in mind, I hope and pray that this summit will yield the most auspicious results for all of us, and I would like to salute you all with love and respect.
Mr. President, James Bays, Zirve English. You talked about your plans for a deal to get the grain out of Ukraine. Can you tell us how that plan is going to work, how close you are to a deal, and when you plan next to speak to President Putin?
Whether it be Mr. Putin or Mr. Zelensky, I believe this weekend or the beginning of next week, we will sustain a telephone diplomacy. There is already a roadmap which is emerging, and after having talked to them, as soon as possible, we are going to render this corridor, if you will, operational. We have about 20 ships docked in the region, and with these ships, we are going to transport the Ukrainian grain out of the ports, and through re-exporting, third countries will be supplied with the Ukrainian grain.
Merhaba, Hümeyra Pamuk, Reuters Haber Ajansı. I'm going to
Hello.
Turkish because that's my mother tongue. Efendim, biraz önce Biden kendi basın
Biden, in his press meeting a minute ago, talked about F-16 fighter jets, and he said he discussed this with you and that he supports their sales, but he's awaiting an approval from the Congress, and he was sure that that approval would be granted. Now, did he give you any promise that he would work with the Congress? In recent years, in Washington, D.C., in the Congress, there's this general tendency against Turkey. Are you sure that F-16s will be sold to Turkey? And did you give you a timeline? And secondly, don't hurry, please. Let's deal with this first.
I'm going to answer your question right away. The parliaments are the places where difficult times are observed. And here, Mr. President said that he would take the necessary steps forward in his capacity. Of course, we're not only talking about the Democrats, we also have the Republicans. A large delegation from Turkey was in the United States. They talked to the Democrats as well as the Republicans in Congress. And we've had a bilateral meeting last night with President Biden. In the aftermath, our delegations will be again sent to the United States to talk to the Republicans in order to cultivate their support. And if that shall happen, I believe Mr. Biden's sincere efforts will enjoy a significant amount of support from Congress. And I believe, without any further delay, I'm going to be sending forward another delegation.
Thank you. My second question, as part of the deal made with Sweden and Finland, how will it be implemented from Turkey's perspective? Because Turkey expects these two countries to take some steps. If you see that those steps are not taken, And when it comes to ratifying that text, would Turkey or could Turkey use its right for a veto again?
Yani
No repetition is required. If we don't have this ratified by our parliament, there is no way out. First, Finland and Sweden will have to deliver the pledges that they were committed to within the memorandum. They have to do what is necessary. On the occasion that they deliver their pledges, we will send this memorandum to our parliament for ratification. But if the pledges will not be delivered, of course, it won't be possible for this memorandum to find its way to the parliament. You know that Macedonia managed to be a member of NATO. How long did it take? 20 years. 11 plus 9. 20 years. And this is not a process that can be easily finalized. I want it, so I'll have it. No, it's not the case. Sweden knows this, and Finland knows this too. And within this understanding and within this consciousness and awareness, if you will, they will take these steps forward, hopefully. PKK, PYD, YPG, and FETÖ, all these terrorist organizations will have to be eradicated. They need to be wiped out. And they have to carry out the legislative amendments in order to do that.
A Haber Rüya Akkuş.
Rüya Akkuş from A Haber. Let's continue with Sweden and Finland. Actually, they started this membership process as a step against Russia, and Russia said they see this as an aggressive policy. And Joe Biden also made a statement and was really harsh about his words against Russia. And he said, we are strengthening our presence in Europe vis-a-vis Russia, he said. So putting all these together, I mean, since the beginning of the war, actually, a normal process has continued, but thinking that Turkey is an ally of NATO. So how will the relations between the two countries?
Biden, Boris Johnson biraz
I meant Boris Johnson and Biden made some harsh statements about Russia. That's what I meant.
değerli arkadaşlar,
I wanted to know what the hard reaction was all about. Distinguished friends, we have a set of relations that have emerged. We have bilateral relations with Russia, but at the same time, we have bilateral relations with Ukraine. And we are leading our politics on a basis of stability instead of a basis of conflict. So whether it be the defense industry, whether it be the energy, for example, in terms of natural gas, we are supplied by Russia up to 40%. And we are jointly constructing our first nuclear power plant in Akkuyu region. These are very significant issues for us, and we cannot just set them aside overnight. So we will monitor the process, and in this process, we will try to base our politics on a scenario of win-win for all parties involved. And if that shall be the case, there will be no concerns whatsoever.
Hello. You are one of the very few NATO leaders who seems to have even brought up the prospect of pursuing a diplomatic solution for the war in Ukraine. Other leaders like Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, they're emphasizing almost exclusively the military component. Biden just this afternoon announced new missile systems being deployed to Ukraine by the U.S. What accounts for this difference in philosophy, and do you think the path being chosen by the U.S. and the U.K. is overly aggressive and is going to prolong the war?
bakalım benim dilimden anlayacak.
Well, I will try to respond, and hopefully you will understand my language through interpretation. The proof is in the eating. There is a method and there's a style of everybody doing certain things. Do you have such an expression or a similar expression? Sizin söylediğinizi efendim, proof is in the eating diye bir söz var. Boris is a close friend of mine. It's a good friend of mine. And he has his own perspective. He has his own style of doing things. And I have my own style of things. Here, we have to establish a politics based on a balance. And I need to believe that diplomacy should be pursued. And if we take steps forward on a win-win scenario, everybody will enjoy more auspicious decisions and results, I believe. So that's why we're talking to Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Putin on a continuous basis. And once a week or every 10 days, we have telephone conversations with them, out of which I believe we will cultivate some results.
Ela Sezen, Haber Global.
Ela Sezen from Haber Global. Mr. President, during the summit, Greece, did you talk about Greece, the fact that they are weaponizing the non-official islands in the Aegean? And did you also talk about the bases that the U.S. is planning to open up in Ukraine?
Greece has adopted an attitude quite recently which never complies with our way of doing politics or leading politics. And after the dinner that we had enjoyed together in Istanbul with him, I offered him something. I told him to have bilateral relations between two countries and never to involve third parties whatsoever. But despite that fact, he went to Congress and he delivered a statement there whereby he just reversed the agreement that we have seemed to have reached in a matter of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And he went to Davos in Switzerland. He did the same. And it wouldn't suffice. On the one hand side, he has been paying special visits to the islands in the Aegean. And during these special visits, he's invested himself in such efforts to arm these little islands or isles. These islands are being protected by Lausanne treaties or Paris agreements. And this is contradictory to these treaties and agreements. You cannot arm those islands. But Greece has taken such an effort and such a step forward. And as you've stated, 5+4, there are attempts by the United States to establish bases on these islands. And when we ask about this, we always get answers. Oh, these are being established against Russia. But my people would not swallow this. My own nation would not buy this. Why? Why is the question? We want to build a world where peace prevails. If we are going to work for that, then why are we taking these steps forward, would be the question to ask. And we don't have a positive approach towards this. And we have always been vocal about this during the bilateral meetings we've had with the leaders.
Sultan
Akdoğan from ATV. Before the summit, now this will be about domestic politics. Before the summit, the opposition made comments about your reaction to Sweden and Finland's membership, and they were saying, why are we objecting to it? And as you said, with the trilateral memorandum of understanding on Tuesday, we have received some solid commitments from them, you said. And this had repercussions, projections among the opposition in Turkey, and they said, we have given concessions now. What do you think about those criticisms?
Where's the concession? Where do we see the concessions? Well, this is what they say. The opposition parties are always talking about the concessions or the compromises that were given by Turkey. Well, the opposition always speaks about different things. He says that they call something white, whereas it's black, and they call what is black white. The Turkish opposition is all about that kind of a diversion. All of the documents are there for them to observe. Everything is out there on the table, and everybody knows how we can approach the situation in a sincere fashion. And our attitude here, our stance here, have been drawing attention is receiving close interest from all the leaders, and everybody is very appreciative of what we have done. And we have accomplished significant gains in fighting terrorism, especially outside Turkey. And we have talked about our fighting against terrorism through all of the evidences that were amassed. Flash drives, video recordings, footages, and the written documents. They will be able to appreciate what's going on even further. The terrorist supporters in Sweden, the terrorism supporters in Sweden are actually going crazy. But the Turkish opposition are not very happy to see what's happened. And when we go back, we shall be talking about them as to what has happened.
Sanal Alkan from Habertürk. At the beginning of your remarks, you said Sweden gave a pledge of extraditing 73 terrorists. Can you explain this, please? Because before, extradition demands had not been met by Sweden.
60
Previously, they have pledged the extradition of 60 terrorists. They were negotiating, let's say, not pledge, but negotiating. But now the number has gone up to 73. During these negotiations, they have pledged the extradition of 73 terrorists, and we will see if they will keep their promises.
Betül Usta from Sabah Daily. During your previous bilateral discussions with Biden in Rome, you had decided on establishing a strategic cooperation scheme. Ankara and Washington, D.C. are discussing this. And this year, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu of Turkey went to the U.S. with a delegation, and he had discussions with Blinken. Now, we expect progress on this, and judicial files are being tackled as part of this process. At the same time, FATSA is a scope where Turkey is, Turkey is being included in the scope.
During these discussions, there were never any issues raised with regards to CATSA, but during the deliberations conducted between the foreign secretaries, there are some positive developments, I can say.
President Nurmi, journalist from Finland, are you saying, or let's say, threatening that Turkey will stop the ratification process if Finland won't send back people you have named as a terrorist or change its legislation? For example, our government have already said that we are not able to change our legislation or send back those people you are asking from us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Of course.
Bana verilen söze bakıyorum.
I'm just looking at the promises given to me. If the promises won't be kept, then whatever is on there in the contract, in the memorandum, we will act accordingly. You are pledging the extradition of these terrorists. You are pledging that legislative amendments will be carried out. If they won't be delivered, then I'm sorry, pardon me, you have to keep your promises. If you are you're leading a dignified array of politics, and if you are leading a dignified foreign policy, you have to keep your promises. Then Turkey will keep her promises. This is what we have agreed on. Sweden has stated the same thing, and Finland has said exactly the same thing. They will keep their promises, and then Erdogan will keep his promise. If I don't keep my promise, then you can hold me accountable.
Thank you, Mr. President, for taking my question. The NATO Charter sets out a commitment to safeguard the freedom of the peoples, founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. Turkey was once the world's worst jailer of journalists. It is consistently ranked among the countries with the least press freedom and freedom of opinion in the world. More than 1,000 human rights lawyers have been arrested following the coup. You have suppressed opposition to your rule. Turkey, under your leadership, does it really fit in NATO?
Bunu diyen kim?
Who says this? Who's saying these things?
House, Amnesty International.
Freedom
Human Rights
House
Watch.
önce kendisini sorgulaması lazım.
Do you,
Well, the Freedom House will have to analyze themselves first. They have to question themselves. In the last 40 years, these terrorists have killed 40,000 civilians. And mothers of Diyarbakir have been waiting for their children before the doors of a political party known by the abbreviation HDP. Their children are 13, 14, and 15 years of age, and they were snatched away to be taken up to the mountains. Where's the Freedom House? They should come and visit the mothers of Diyarbakir and to hear these stories from those mothers. What are they waiting for? They are waiting for their children who were kidnapped from them. The members of HDP political party, the PKK members, the PYD members, are they doing what they're doing in the name of freedom? We have to do the definition of freedom correctly. Freedom and my freedom ends where your freedom begins. Your freedom is up to where my freedom is. We can only cultivate results with this understanding in mind. But there's a fact in Turkey, which is the Kandil Mountain. And there, on top of that mountain, daughters of 13, 14, and 15 years of age are being kidnapped on top of the mountains, and they are being trained by terrorists to use weapons just as tall as them. I wonder how knowledgeable is Freedom House about these issues?
Bouchery with respect, Mr. President. What about the journalists you've jailed? What about the civil rights activists you've jailed? The human rights lawyers that you have jailed?
Benim şu anda ülkemde
In my country, nobody is incarcerated without any criminal reasoning. If you're not subjected to any legal sanctions, nobody has been incarcerated due to the things they have written, due to the criticisms they have voiced, and due to the things they have stated. All this is about disinformation. We will never forget about this.
Jan Andersson, Swedish Radio. Mr. President, I have a question according these guarantees that you have received from the Prime Minister of Sweden and even the President of Finland, according to the 33, as you put it, terrorists as a kind of an extradition to Turkey. And what's the difference?
73, actually.
3 and
73.
Yes, please. Thank you.
73.
Not 33, 73.
73.
Okay. Can you please
Ya bunların bize verecekler.
They will be extradited to us. That's what they have pledged. And now that pledge is in the records on the memorandum. So they will have to keep their promises.
I'd like to ask a question about diplomacy. It is a one-of-a-kind situation because you have lifted the veto to Finland and Sweden 2 days ago, and we are living a momentum and historic moment if the membership is validated. And at the same time, you're one of the rare leaders keeping both conversation and communication with President Zelensky and President Putin. And you have also been implementing effective unlocking humanitarian corridors during this war. So how can we call this new fashion of diplomacy that you're implementing? Because this is very, very new for me. And what are the next steps? Because you said that you're going to focus on getting a ceasefire. Thank you. Teşekkür ederim.
Her şeyden önce
First and foremost, I'm a politician. My career as a politician dates back to 4 decades. I've been the mayor, and then the prime minister, and then the president of Turkey. And I have lived through different processes in party organizations. I was so little, and I climbed my way up, leading to presidency. And all throughout that process, I learned one thing. Politics is not all about conflict and fighting. You don't need chaos. But if you are focusing on establishing peace through your politics, you always have to work to gain new friends. The more adversaries you shall gain, the more you will lose in the realm of politics. We go back with Mr. Putin a long time, and Zelensky, our relations with Mr. Zelensky are quite new, because his career in the Ukrainian politics is not very old. And ever since he became the president of Ukraine, we have managed to establish quite intensive relations. But we date back longer with Mr. Putin. There's a fact there we have to admit to. If we are going to be mediators, one of the fundamental steps to be taken forward was to bring the Ukrainian delegates and the Russian delegates all together in Istanbul. We've had them sit down and talk. And through these discussions, we've managed to launch a new process. I hope and pray that in the aftermath, this process will be accelerated even further. And hopefully, in a world where we have the grain crisis, Russia and Ukraine will come to some sort of a place where we will be able to take those grains out of those ports in order to supply the people who are suffering the lack of these commodities and help them heave a sigh of relief.
Assalamu alaikum, Cumhuriyet Başkanı.
Aleykümselam.
My question is about Syrian operation in northern Syria. So Sweden and Finland confirmed about the Turkey's concern about the terrorism. So do you think that that new coming operation will be understood by international society? Thank you.
Uluslararası camianın
I think we won't carry out an operation where international community will not understand or will not appreciate. We will carry out operations which can be understood and grasped by the international community. We are experienced enough, so don't be concerned. Don't worry.
Natalia from the Catalan News Agency. I wanted to ask you about the meeting today with the Spanish President, Pedro Sánchez. I wanted to know your assessment on the relations with Spain, and also if you have any updates on the delivery of Spanish weapons. Thank you.
Spain, more than anything else, is a very close friend of ours. And during the most trying times, during the most delicate and critical times, they have supplied Turkey with patriots. Other partners in NATO took away their missile batteries, but Spain didn't do that. And we still have that equipment in Turkey. And I would like to thank Spain once again on behalf of my people, on behalf of my state, but especially Prime Minister Sánchez. I'm ever so grateful. And we have taken a step forward with Spain, which is about building of an aircraft carrier. And with Spain, we have constructed an aircraft carrier by the name Anadolu. And it will begin seafaring as of this year, hopefully. It will be an aircraft carrier where the helicopters or the drones will land and take off. And outside of this, we have a trade volume of about $15 billion between the two countries. Even more than that. And we have the goal of increasing that number up to $20 billion. And I know Pedro Sanchez is a very important statesman, and this is very instrumental. His statesmanship is very instrumental in achieving these goals. And I would like to thank my distinguished friend and King Felipe VI once again on behalf of myself and on behalf of my nation. And let's look at this part. Let's have questions from here this time.
From NBC News. In the past, Joe Biden has said some things about you that left you very angry. This week, you appear to be best friends with President Biden. What changed? And can I press you also on whether you were given any guarantees by members of Congress that Turkey would receive military supplies, for example, F-16s?
Can you possibly have such a thing in politics? I mean, yesterday is yesterday, today is today in politics. We should know this. So, I mean, in 24 hours, a lot of things change in politics. And with this understanding in mind, we will continue to do politics, but we will stand straight too, of course. And the relations between Turkey and the US goes way back to long years. Before I became a prime minister, I had started a process with former President Bush, and things have continued since then. We have had good days, bad days, but somehow Turkey-US relations have continued on a certain track, somehow. Microphone, please.
Sorry, this is the second part of my question. Just, did you get any guarantees from members of Congress that they would pass agreements to send weapons to Turkey, F-16s, for example?
Şu anda işte
Now, there is an inconsistency here, which is there's Democrats, there's Republicans. Now, there are two sides, and we need support from both to a certain extent. But in spite of this, President Biden was sure of himself, I believe, and in fact he did make an explanation to this effect here, and I hope that a result will suit our closeness and friendship eventually.
President Nick Schifrin from PBS NewsHour. If I could go back to the question of extradition, the agreement that you signed with Finland and Sweden says that Finland and Sweden will address the extradition requests. It does not say that Finland and Sweden will confirm Turkey's extradition requests. So are you asking Finland and Sweden to go beyond the language that you've agreed?
Now, you have read the text. If it says they will tackle this, or they will extradite or not, I mean, the thing is, what is important is what we understand, and what's important is what we discuss during our meetings and deliberations with them. And regarding this, these 73 people, Sweden gave us a promise through this text that they will update these things about these 73 people and will extradite them. They will either extradite or not. The thing is, we will follow things up based on this text, and we will take a decision accordingly.
We want the world to respect Turkish judicial system. You cited that earlier to a question. If the Finnish and Swedish judicial systems themselves do not allow the extradition, will you respect those judicial decisions?
biz bunların özellikle
Now, when it comes to terrorism particularly, if their judicial systems pave the way for terrorism, they should explain how. If not, they should explain how. In our country, terror and terrorism in our judicial system is not allowed for in any way at all. And in our system, our legislation, our regulations are quite harsh when it comes to terrorists, and our judicial system does what needs to be done about such people. And I hope that Finland and Sweden, well, they said it themselves. They said our legislation is harsh too, and we will do what it takes. This is what they said. So we expect them to do what it takes. So, dear colleagues, dear friends, won't we approach an end?
Euronews. I would like to make a question about Greece, because we saw yesterday, after your meeting with the American President Joe Biden, that the need for the stability in the Aegean has been discussed. So what exactly has been discussed? And this means that we should expect a de-escalation of tensions in the region, or even a meeting or a new approach with the Greek Prime Minister? Thank you.
Now, when it comes to Greece, as long as Greece doesn't cause tensions, we're not dying to create any tension ourselves. But let me tell you the following. 147 times is the number where Greece violated our airspace, and they have to explain themselves. I'm talking about 147 times of violating our airspace, so you do this, and then vis-a-vis this, the Turkish aircrafts respond to this, and you will feel uncomfortable about it? No way. So first of all, Greece has to put things in order there, and they should not try to arm those islands and isles, which is against the Lausanne Treaty and the Paris Treaty. So they should open up and read those three treaties first, and they should take their steps accordingly.
Una pregunta muy breve. Se ha hablado mucho en esta cumbre de lucha antiterrorista y quería saber si hay algún plan de la OTAN o de Turquía.
Sen de İspanyolcayı bilmiyorsun tabii.
¿Continúo?
Your interpreters don't speak Spanish, sir. Your interpreters in the booth speak Turkish and English only. Can you ask your question in English, please?
Many times about terrorism and the threat it's supposed to mean to NATO and its allies. And I would like to know if Turkey and NATO has plans to combat that terrorism in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan.
Now, combating terrorism in Afghanistan. Now, regarding that, as you know, priorly, we had close to 1,000 soldiers and officers there. And together with NATO and together with the US, we were part of the coalition forces. And we spent a lot of efforts there. And now, likewise, in Afghanistan, there is a new process now, and we have the desire to contribute to this new process. With this in mind, we are saying that we're ready to operate the Kabul airport. In fact, including Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, in a tripartite manner, we can possibly operate the airport in Kabul, and we can work for infrastructure and superstructure work for the airport, and we can give support accordingly. This is what we have said. And we're waiting for the Afghan party, the Afghan side, and we're waiting for what they will say. If they approach this positively, we will take steps accordingly.
President, Consoli from Asca News, Italy. I would like to ask one question concerning the definition of terrorism, because this is the very point of all this discussion with Finland and Sweden. Turkey had a problem with the European Union about the Turkish definition of terrorism in the Turkish judiciary system, which is not accepted by the EU. And that's the reason why the problem of the free passports for the EU was never solved. Now you are saying that Sweden and Finland will have to extradite terrorists that you consider terrorists, but they could be not considered terrorists under the EU definition and Finnish and Swedish definition. PKK is a terrorist organization under the EU list, but the EU list does not consider terrorists the FETO organization and the YPG or PYD. So they cannot extradite people that belong to this organization just because they belong to this organization. If there are proven crimes, violent crimes, terrorist crimes, yes, but they have to be proven for those single people, single persons. So is there a problem for you, if you, Turkey, and your veto that you have removed now, if these countries decide that people that you accuse of terrorism are not terrorists under their law, under the EU definition, they are not in the list, the EU list, because they're not PKK, but they belong to this organization. There is a problem. Is this something that would push you to put the veto again? Thanks.
Terörist noktasında
In terms of terrorists, we have amassed evidence that were submitted to our interlocutors. Right next to engaging in violence, we're talking about people who have killed a lot of people. And these individuals cannot be thought of having nothing to do with terrorism. And if the state would still consider that for a fact, we can never depend on their legislations. The intelligence agencies will share the relevant evidence about the people. And in the light of those evidences, these individuals will be demanded to be extradited. And the Turkish judiciary and the intelligence agency of Turkey will never demand the extradition of these individuals without the amassed evidence proving their culpability. Thank you. We have to go back. We have to go back to Turkey. I would like to thank you for your kind interest and for your questions. Especially, may you remain in health.
Türk eğitimimiz soldan çıkış yapabilirler. Tamam, ben